Hello and welcome to the Work of Thy Hands podcast, where we interview Christian creatives conversing on the ways they have seen their creative projects as co-creative efforts with Christ, times they have drawn inspiration from the physical creation, and their thoughts surrounding the nature of work as a creative. I'm your host, Allison Ramirez, and today I'm thrilled to be welcoming our next guest to the podcast, Karina Fabian. Karina writes science fiction and fantasy, mostly humorous. She's a clean comedian and president of the Catholic Writers Guild. She lives 8 miles from the Kennedy Space Center and watches rockets launch from her front yard. Welcome, Karina. So glad to have you as a guest today. Yeah, those of you who are listening, I got to meet Karina actually for the first time about a few weeks ago at the in-person Catholic Writers Guild, and she gave
So fun.
that was amazing. We had such a great time and got to hear some of her comedy, and she was the keynote speaker. So I'd love to hear, Karina, how did you get into writing? I think you had mentioned during your presentation you've written, is it over 60 books at this point?
50.
Over
Working
50?
on the 60. Give me a
Yeah,
year or two.
that is so many
So,
books. So how did you get into writing?
well, I've always loved writing. I've always been a storyteller, kind of a cliche that way. But in 1995 or so, just gotten out of the military, was living in Wyoming. My husband was the active duty military. I was in reserves at that time. We had two little kids, and I was kind of starved for adult conversation. I was reading a lot of fiction, and there was this book, Harry Turtledove, great writer, not one of his best books. It was right before Lent, and I was furious at this book because it was just not what he could do. And I'm staring at it and I'm going, I could write a better book than this. And I thought, you know what? Why am I not writing when I love to tell stories? So I put that book down and I said, you know what, God? I am going to give up reading for Lent. Just no more reading books. I will take up writing for Lent, and then you tell me where you want it to go. By Easter, I had already written a short story, and I had two writing jobs, one with our diocese magazine. So, yeah, God just said, yes, it's about time, and led me on that path.
Yeah, I love how you used your Lenten resolution to write because, yeah, it was in recent years. Someone was telling me you don't always, well, you gave something up, the reading, but to add something in as well
Yeah.
can make your Lent really beneficial. And for you, it was like, sounds like the catalyst for your writing journey.
It
That's
was. It got
great.
me started.
Yeah. So then, had you been writing, so before 1995, you said you were in the military. Did you ever have any background in English or any like inkling in your mind at that time before 1995 that you
Oh,
could
like I
write?
said,
Or
I'd always been a storyteller. I had written some short
Mhm.
stories and things. I did not major in English or literature or anything like that because I'm really bad at interpreting stories. I
Okay.
never see a story the way somebody else sees the story. So do not
Hmm.
ask me the deep themes behind anything I read or write because it just doesn't happen. I don't think that way.
Yeah.
So I was actually a mathematics major, but I had taken one literature class. It was a sci-fi class, and my first story or my first paper was to interpret a story. And I got a B on it only because I'm a good writer, but he thought my analogy was completely wrong. We had the option of writing an original short story instead of doing a paper. So for my next paper, I wrote a short story. He said, hey, that's a really good story. You should make it into a novel. And so I spent the next year of college working on this novel. And
Hmm.
it was what you'd expect from a first novel by a college student. I tried to get it sold. Nobody wanted it. I put it away, grew up, and then it was about 2000, I think I said, you know what? I'm ready to start working on something big. And I dusted off that novel, read it, and said, wow, this is awful. I can't fix this. But I like this plot. I like this character. I like this
Hmm.
piece, the world I like. I rewrote it, and that is now the Madness of Canaan series. I actually had to tear it apart so much that it became 4 books instead of 1. But
Mhm.
it's fabulous, and it's about a psychic. At that time, he was this cool college kid, very much a Mary Sue. And by the time I was done with him, he was in an insane asylum. He wasn't able to cope with his psychic capabilities. There were aliens contacting him, thinking he was going to save their world. And gee, the psychiatrist just loved that. And in the end, he finds his way back to sanity. He goes to the other world. He does save both worlds, gets married, has kids, has a best friend, the whole 9 yards.
Mhm.
I love these books now. They're still
Yeah.
some of my favorites.
Yeah. That reminds me when I was writing finishing right now, my first fiction series. I started that like, yeah, probably 10 years ago or more even. And it was, yeah, one of those stories at the time. I thought this is amazing. And I revisited it. And of course, yeah, it needed so
Mm-hmm.
much work. And I pretty much scrapped the whole plot. I kept the characters, the two main characters. I really thought they were just great. And I
Mm-hmm.
put them into a whole new world, which ended up being a dystopian world as opposed to like a contemporary, you know, small town world. And so that was the change that the story needed, was the genre switch. But yeah, it's so much fun to return to the old stories and you see how much you've grown
Yeah.
and you
Oh, and
can
it just
have new
goes to
ideas.
show you shouldn't throw out anything
Yeah.
because it may be that it was the right story or the right characters or the right plot, just the wrong time for you as a writer. I'm having
Mhm.
that same experience again with a book that I actually did start in about 96, 97. That it's secular fiction and more literary women's fic, something I don't write in.
Mhm.
And I couldn't do it. I loved the story, but I didn't feel ready for it. So I put it aside and I just brushed it off 30 years later and went, I now have the chops for it. And I'm
Mhm.
working on it right now and I'm very excited about it. So,
Yeah. Well, I think you talked a little bit at your presentation at the conference about you've done, I know, traditional and indie publishing. Is that right? You've gone both
yes,
routes at some point.
yes.
Yeah. And do you have a favorite? Do you feel like there's pros and cons of both? I always
It
like to touch
depends
a
on
little
the
bit on the
work.
publishing.
It
Mm-hmm.
depends on the work. For most of my stuff, I do prefer self publishing. My Dragon Eye series, which features my dragon detective who is in the employ of Catholic Church and is basically solving crimes and saving the world on our side of the
Mm-hmm.
interdimensional gap. Um, those need to be self published because they're fast, they're varied. I sometimes will write a large novel, like right now I'm doing Mensa Magic and Mayhem, and they're funny. A lot of times they're very funny. But then there are times when Vern, because he's a dragon detective, wants to just lean into that noir vibe, like the book I just published, Los Lagos Heat. It's very noir, it's very serious, and it's also very short. If I were with a traditional publisher, they'd say, well, that's really sweet, but we don't want it.
Mm-hmm.
And they would expect every Verne novel needs to be about this length and it needs to be funny, and you can't just suddenly do a spin off or anything like that. I have two spin offs that are fighting for attention right now.
Okay.
They're next year. So those kind of things need to be with just with me, with self publishing, where I have complete control and I can have just fun with it. And to be
Mm-hmm.
honest, if they sell, I'm happy. If they don't, then I have a few great fans that are looking for them, and that contents me.
Mm-hmm.
Now
Yeah.
I have a middle grade sci fi, Catholic sci fi, about a young boy that um, lives in outer space, was raised Catholic, and is having all kinds of adventures throughout the whole solar system as he learns his faith. And I don't have a self publishing audience for that. And so I wanted that one to go to a Catholic publisher. And Pauline Books and Media just picked it up, and we're just now starting into the editing process. And I'm really, really excited. I'm having so much fun. There are advantages to a traditional publisher. Case in point, they sent me this lovely package, and it's got all about how their marketing team is going to
Mm-hmm.
help me. They sent me cute little stickers. I mean, and you
Oh,
just feel very loved.
yeah.
So there's that, and also they have that audience already. I just need to
Mm-hmm.
make sure that I'm good enough and that I'm active in reaching the audience with their help. So that's why I went with them.
Yes.
And the
Yeah.
one that I'm doing now, the secular fiction Art in the Attic, I'm actually going to take to a an agent and see if I can get it agented, because I think that one too is worth a large audience and is also not the audience I'm doing right now, because even though
Mhm.
self-publishing gives me a lot of room to maneuver, this is so out of left field that I'm not sure I could reach that audience without a whole lot of work.
Right.
So
Yeah,
may
it
as well
sounds
give
like
it to a real publisher. Or not real, but you know what I mean.
yes.
Traditional.
Well, it sounds like yeah, the lesson is knowing your books, right? And
Mm-hmm.
knowing like, okay, is this something that maybe isn't that mainstream that it's going to be hard for a traditional publisher to want to take on and yeah, and you can go the self-publishing route or realizing, okay, yeah, I think I could get the help of the traditional publisher and marketing the book and it could be a good fit for what they're publishing. So, yeah, that's good advice. Another question I like to ask is how does your faith inspire your work, or do you feel like your writing is co-creative in any way with God in that process?
I think it comes down to trust. I
Mm-hmm.
believe that as long as that I'm working within God's will, He's going to use my work for His glory, whether I'm noticing it or not, and whether or not I'm being exclusively Catholic or not.
Mm-hmm.
And trusting in that, and trusting that He's going to get the books to the right people at the right time, is really what freed me to do my stories and to be as prolific as I am, and to not second guess myself and think, I'm wasting my time. I really should just go get a job or go do more volunteering hither and yon. That what I'm doing has a worth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that though that I really like that because yeah, and I think you said this earlier, you might publish a book that only a few people read and enjoy, and another one might reach hundreds, who knows, thousands of readers. And so yeah, just you have the desire to write, you have those ideas, you're getting them out there, and then you're just trusting whoever this book's, meant to touch. Like if it's a lot or a few people, it'll find its place. And yeah, I think that would help a lot for people that are like just stuck, like I don't know if I can keep writing. Is this good enough? So,
Sometimes I do get letters from people that tell me, "Hey, I was in this bad situation. We were heading to the emergency room, and we just grabbed one of your books to read while we were there, and it just distracted
wow.
us from the the worry and the fear and the boredom of the long wait and everything else, and we just lost ourselves in your book." And somebody else wrote me that they were, remember last year they had all those tornadoes in the Midwest,
Oh, yeah.
and
Mhm.
someone said, "I just took your book down into the basement with me, and I was fine. I didn't have to worry and panic because I was all caught up in all the adventures that Vern was having. And I was
Yeah.
laughing during this not hurricane, that's me, during this tornado watch." So it does mean
Mhm.
a lot. And that tells me that God is finding the right people, the right readers at the right
Mhm.
time.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I love those too, though. Yeah, when you hear from readers, whether it's a review or a letter or something that that people are reading the books and that they're having an impact. So
Yeah.
that's great. Well, tell me a little bit about the themes, if you have any nature themes or animal themes. I know Vern is your dragon that's profiled in a lot of your books, but do you see like the physical creation, whether it's an imaginary elements you're adding in, coming into your stories that you're creating at all?
Well, like I said, I don't think heavily in terms of theme. I don't go
Mm-hmm.
into my work thinking, well, I want to, discuss the nature of blah blah blah. I just think, hey, here's a really cool character. How am I going to get them in trouble? And I let them do it. And if somebody finds a theme, then that's great. So I'm a character driven writer.
Okay.
Um, so I think that anything that does come out of those stories is because God put it in me.
Mhm.
And so it is just it's just a natural um, outburst, even
Right.
if it's a mythical character like in the Vern series. I mean, I have Vern, who is a fairy dragon. The book I'm working on right now has this ridiculous cast with everything from Coyote, the Native American trickster god, to naiads who are playing with the alligators and calling them their Mr. Stumpy Gnomes.
So then it sounds like would you say you start with a character then that interests
Yeah,
you, and then do you craft like the world and the plot around the character? Is that usually your approach?
the
Um,
characters
mhm.
tell me the world and the
The
plot and
world.
everything else. I tend to toss them in. Now, that's not always the case. Certainly with Vern, that's how it started.
Mhm.
I wanted to write for an anthology about dragons, and I wanted something different.
Okay.
And my husband and I went through every kind of dragon we could think of that's ever been in fiction, and I settled on a Nor dragon, but I could also make it a little funny with some jokes in there. And so that's how I ended up with Vern as a dragon detective. Then he became Catholic because every Nor detective needs a reason to have a bitter past. And what could be more of a bitter past for a dragon than having a very bad fight with St. George and losing the fight? And from there, everything just exploded. At some point,
Mhm.
I decided that Vern needed a partner and he needed some grace in his life. So suddenly,
Mhm.
Sister Grace, who is a nun in the fairy church and who is a mage, was suddenly his partner. So that opened up a lot. And then I had to think about how magic works for fairy and not for the mundane. And so then that led to the whole idea that only certain species can do magic. And like I said, it just keeps growing. In fact, I have um, this huge document that is the story Bible, and I'm still building the story Bible for that. So,
Yeah.
but then on the other hand, I also write Star Trek parody with my own original characters, and half of the time, what I'll do is I will go and watch a Star Trek episode and then think, if my characters were in this same situation, what are they going to do that's different? And you will get a completely different story with enough elements of the original story to to be obviously a parody of it. So
Mhm. Yeah, I love your creativity, and it sounds like sometimes you put like explicit Catholic elements in like your completely mythical, made up worlds, which I think is just great. And
and again,
oh,
I'm not purposely doing it. The
yeah,
characters are doing it for me.
right, yeah, and you're really letting them guide the
Yeah.
direction and how the
Mm-hmm.
story. That's kind of exciting. I think I heard that discovery writing. I think somebody mentioned where, yeah,
Yeah.
instead of like having a plot by plot outline, like you're really just sitting down and saying, okay, how's it going to go today? And yeah, that even like mirrors a lot of life, right? Like we get up and we kind of say, all right, how's it going to go today?
Yeah.
We're
Oh, most of my life is that. I mean, I will make my lists. I will make my lists, but
Mhm.
that doesn't mean that they're going to happen. It's always a joy when it does. I can go, oh, I got all 20 things off my list today. But then there's always extra things
Mhm.
pop in, and that's what
Right,
makes life
right.
interesting and fun. And that's what makes fiction great too.
Exactly. Well, in addition to your characters being your main inspiration, do you have any other points of inspiration for you in your writing?
Everything is inspiration, in some way or another. Um, And again, it'll depend on the story.
Mhm.
Sometimes I'll read about something and I'll go, oh, I can make that a good story.
Yeah.
Or I like submitting to anthologies because anthologies inspire me. Somebody says, hey,
Mhm.
I need a story about X. And I will think, I'll bet I could put this character in there. Or I could make a Vern story for that one. And so that always gets me going.
Mhm. Yeah.
And yeah, sometimes something just comes into my heart that I can't explain, and I just want to write this story. So,
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, I remember I think I was in college and I submitted actually it was an essay to a Lewis and Tolkien
mm,
anthology, and it was like a requirement of the class, and I remember that they picked my essay, and yeah, it was so fun to see it in this larger book with other authors and writers,
mm-hmm.
because then you're reminded too, like, oh, this isn't just a solitary thing, like we're all in this together, and you're getting to read what others have written too, and see your work along with them. So yeah, anthologies are a lot of fun.
They are, and
Um,
it's great to see the different takes someone can make on the same topic.
hmm That's true. Exactly. Yeah, because all the essays were about either Lewis or Tolkien in some aspect of their life or their writing, and yeah, everybody had like a different approach, but it was all centered around the same topic. So, well, I'm curious about the Catholic Writers Guild because I know that you're currently the president of the guild, and I think were you part of its inception as well?
I was one of the co-founders.
Okay, yeah. So I'd love to hear a little bit about that, how that got started.
Okay, well, I had just published an anthology with my
hmm
husband called Infinite Space, Infinite God. It's out of print now. But we were looking for ways to promote it, and I was looking for other Catholic writers to bounce ideas off of.
Yeah.
And this was back in the days of AOL and Yahoo and that kind of thing. And so I joined, I think it was a Yahoo group called Catholic Writers, and I spent 4 or 5 months on there listening to people gripe about how there's no market and how people don't appreciate Catholic work anymore, and how I don't know how to promote, along with people then just saying, oh, hey, I'm on this group, I published this book, read my book. And then a bunch of us got together and we just said, are you tired of talking about it? Isn't it time we did something? And so about 6 or 8 of us splintered off of that group and formed the Catholic Writers Guild. And from there, it was amazing. It's one of those, if you build it, they will come kind of situations.
hmm
Because no sooner did we do that than I was part of an online conference and thought, we could do this with the guild. So we had an online conference, and then Ann Lewis got involved with the Catholic Marketing Network, who had heard about us because we popped up on the internet. We made a website, woo!
hmm
And and so then we became involved with them, and we started doing the live conference with them. And then more people started coming, and now we are 600 and some members strong. We have publishers who rely on us, who love our authors, who come and hear pitch sessions every year. We have tangible benefits from discounts on editing and formatting, marketing, all of that kind of stuff. We have crit groups, we have specialty groups, and we have discussion channels that are both fun and sometimes really serious. There's Catholic theology being discussed, as well as, hey, I just wrote this little thing. What do you guys think? So it's been fabulous, and quite frankly, if there is any inspiration that keeps me going, I would say it is the guild. The people there have been amazing. My best friends I found in the guild, my mentors, and the people that I trust to critique my work and not just go, oh yeah, that's nice, yay, you misspelled from again, but to really get in and say, I don't understand this character, or you mentioned this but you never mentioned it earlier, that kind of thing that just makes the book so much.
Yeah.
So
And how long
yeah,
ago was that?
it's
Like, how long
um
has the guild been around at
two,
this point?
we incorporated in 2008. So,
Okay.
and it was 2006, 2007 we
Yeah.
started
I
doing
will
it.
say, I know my personal experience. It was about 5 years ago when I started really seriously looking into, publishing and really working hard on my first
Mm-hmm.
professional book. And yeah, the Guild was like the first group that I found. And I think it was 2020, because I remember it was during the pandemic. I think I went to my
Yeah.
first online conference. And yeah, I just was blown away by how many people were there and all the opportunities and, places for connection because yeah, I was like, well, I'm Catholic and I love to write. I love to find a community of others and I was just starting out, so I knew nothing, about like publishing and serious writing and all that. And yeah, that's why it was so great to get to go to the in-person conference this year because I was telling people from my church, like, they're like, oh, they were trying to understand like the dynamic of the group. I'm like, no, we're like online from all over and we're gonna go and meet in one place in person. And they're like, wow, that's so cool.
For thinking about joining and going, um, we don't necessarily require that you write Catholic uh, books.
Mhm.
You can write for the secular market as long as your books have the Catholic worldview infused in it, and as long as you are a practicing Catholic in accordance with the magisterium. So that's our only requirements, and you don't even have to be published. We are
Mhm.
here for the experienced writer, but we're also here for the person who's brand new trying to figure out how it works. We've got some documents even that we're compiling with advice for new writers. So,
Oh,
which
that's
the
great.
advice is coming from very experienced writers and editors.
Mhm.
So, not just, Jenny, hey, I wrote a book, I know everything.
Well, and I think you had mentioned at the conference that there are some local chapters, is that right, of the guild that have popped up
Hmm.
in various
Yep,
dioceses?
we have 12 local chapters right now. Some of which
Mhm.
are only meeting online that I know of, unless they're doing some get-togethers that I haven't heard about, and a few that aren't online but are meeting in person.
Mhm. Yeah, that's great. So even if you're someone that you like the in-person connection still, then it sounds like some groups have formed that are meeting even in person
Yeah,
at their
yeah,
diocese.
and
So,
we're always glad to get more groups because it's
mhm.
really we need that support.
Yeah, definitely. Well, great. Well, lastly, I like to ask everybody on the show, do you have any advice for other creatives? It could be writers or just anyone with all you have so much creativity and ideas as you've been sharing. So, yeah, any advice to
Okay,
pass
I wrote these down because you asked me ahead of time. I have
on?
4 pieces of advice. Number
Okay.
1, do not expect your writing to pay your bills, or you're going to frustrate yourself. Okay, so have a way to support yourself outside of writing. Then, if you want to be big, you need to learn marketing and work on it. Second, God expects us to use the gifts that He gives us. So do not feel guilty about putting some time into your writing, into your creative work. And that means both learning how to do it better and actually doing it. Even if you only make a book that goes to your family, it's still worthwhile. Number 3, find like minded people to support you. If you are Catholic, the Catholic Writing Guild is a great place to start. And that's CatholicWritersGuild.com, by the way. And then the fourth thing is develop your gift, get feedback, take classes, practice. And if something you're writing isn't working, you can try it again. You can write something else and put what you have aside and then go back to the one that you have. Or just consider it, hey, this was my practice story. I can toss it. I don't need to do it. But keep at it and keep trying.
I love that. I think those are all very relevant and very helpful. I know I can speak to the first one about, yeah, I when I first started, I definitely had an idealized view of how much you make when you write your book. So,
Yeah, me
yeah,
too.
certainly. Yeah, if you have another stream of income, like or someone that you live with,
Yeah, I
your
was going to say,
spouse or
marry
parent.
well. I did that. I married very well, so I'm lucky.
Right. Yeah. And then you can have, more freedom to pursue your writing. So that's great. Well, those of you who are listening, if you want to stay connected with Karina and all of her creative works, check the show notes for links to her professional email, website, newsletter, and social media links. Thank you, Karina, for joining me today. It was
Glad to be
a lot of
here.
fun to hear about your writing journey and about the Guild and your advice for writers. So we'll close out today as we always do with our closing prayer. This is a prayer that's found on the Catholic Creatives website. It's a great one for anyone who's a writer or a creative in general. So, in the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, amen. Creator of the universe, how infinite and astonishing are your worlds. O divine imagination, you created a crater when you imagined me into existence. Breathe breath into so much dust. Let me lament for forgetting daily to rise up out of the clay. Free me from the deceit of the mundane and from the lure of comfort, which dulls all my given edges. Most of all, light of my life, forgive my blindness, open all my eyes, salt me with newness and dreams, fire my soul with your inventive flame. Let me be committed to the world by it and find in it the deepest joy. Universal creativity flow through me, faith to see things not yet seen, hope to overflow broken cisterns, and love to free me forever. Flow, O river, from the holy temple, through my mind to my hand. Infuse my work with spirit to feed hungry souls. In the name of the Father, and of the Son.